Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at the JonBenét Ramsey case.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a really interesting case,
A very fascinating case.
and it's one that's been in the public consciousness for years. We're going to be really diving deep into this one. And it's a case that starts with a very specific image. Boulder, Colorado, December 26, 1996. 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey is found dead in her family's basement.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those cases that just captures the imagination. I mean, you have a beauty queen, a child beauty queen, found murdered, and all these weird circumstances around it.
Yeah.
There are so many questions that remain unanswered. The evidence is very strange, and there are so many different theories out there.
Right from the beginning, the ransom note that was found in the house, it just immediately throws up red flags.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's 2.5 pages long.
Yeah.
Who writes a 2.5-page ransom note?
No one. It's unheard of.
It's like they wanted to make sure it was read. It's written with a lot of dramatic phrasing.
Yeah, it's like it's straight out of a Hollywood movie.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the language in it
Yeah.
was very similar to movies that were popular at the time.
Yeah, like Ruthless People, Ransom. They even found similarities to Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
You have to wonder if the writer was trying to mimic these films or if it was some kind of a coded message.
Yeah. And then there's the fingerprints, or lack thereof.
Yeah, that's another strange thing about this note.
There were no fingerprints found on it, except for Patsy Ramsey's, JonBenét's mother, and the authorities who handled it.
Yeah. You'd think if you were a kidnapper, you would be a lot more careful. You wouldn't want to leave your fingerprints all over the ransom note.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not the only thing that pointed suspicion towards the Ramseys.
No, there were a lot of other strange details about that note.
Yeah.
Like all the exclamation points, they used a lot of strange initialisms. It all felt very staged, like it wasn't a real ransom note.
Yeah, and then of course there's the ransom amount, $118,000, which was almost exactly the same amount as John Ramsey's Christmas bonus from the previous year.
Yeah, that's a pretty big coincidence. Yeah. Some people have even tried to connect it to Psalm 118. They think maybe there was a religious meaning to that number.
Yeah.
But it's hard to ignore the fact that it was so close to John's bonus.
With all those weird elements about the ransom note, it makes sense that the police immediately started looking at John and Patsy.
Yeah, it's natural for them to suspect the parents in a case like this, especially when there's no sign of forced entry. And the crime scene seemed staged.
Right.
And then, of course, you have their behavior. They were very hesitant to cooperate with the police.
Yeah, and that only made them look more suspicious.
Especially since this was a high-profile family. They were very well known in their community, and a lot of people were watching how they were reacting to this tragedy.
Yeah.
Even the governor of Colorado at the time publicly urged them to cooperate with the police.
Yeah. The pressure was on them. And there were other things that made people question their behavior, too, like the conflicting reports about Patsy's appearance on the morning of the murder.
Oh.
Some people said she was wearing makeup from the night before, which seemed odd, given the circumstances.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a mother getting all dressed up after finding her daughter murdered.
Yeah.
And then there's the bedwetting theory. Some people thought that maybe Patsy, she was known for being very meticulous.
Yeah.
Maybe she snapped after finding out that JonBenét had wet the bed.
Yeah. So maybe it was just a tragic overreaction.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was something more sinister. And of course, there's Burke, JonBenét's brother. He was only 9 years old at the time. But he's been the subject of a lot of speculation over the years.
Yeah. He was never officially named as a suspect, but some people believe he might have been involved somehow.
Yeah, some theories suggest that maybe he accidentally hurt JonBenét during an argument or something like that, and then the parents panicked and covered it up.
Right. And there were also people who pointed to Burke's behavior during interviews with investigators. They thought he seemed odd, like maybe he knew more than he was letting on.
Yeah, and then there was that CBS documentary in 2016.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
That really put forward the theory that Burke might have been responsible. They suggested that maybe he hit JonBenét with a flashlight, and then the parents covered it up.
Right. That documentary led to a lot of controversy. Burke actually sued CBS for defamation.
Yeah, it just added another layer of complexity to this already very complicated case.
It's hard to know what to believe.
Yeah.
But even with all the focus on the Ramsey family, there was always evidence pointing towards an intruder.
Yeah.
Like the broken basement window and the unlocked door. And then, of course, there's the unidentified male DNA that was found at the crime scene.
Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack there. We have a bizarre ransom note, suspicious behavior from the parents, a potentially involved brother, and now the possibility of an intruder. This case is like a puzzle with 1,000 pieces.
It is, and we're just getting started.
I'm ready for the next piece of the puzzle. Before we go there, I want to go back to the 911 call, the one that Patsy Ramsey made. It's been described as really strange and full of inconsistencies. What was it about that call that made it stand out?
Yeah, it's a really bizarre piece of the puzzle. But before we get into that, I want to talk about another person who was involved in this case, Fleet White.
Okay.
He was a friend of the Ramseys, and he was actually at their house on the morning of the murder. His behavior after the crime and during questioning by the police was very strange.
Okay. So now we have a strange ransom note. Suspicious parents, a potentially involved brother, the possibility of an intruder, a strange 911 call, and now a family friend who's acting suspiciously. Where do we go from here?
Well, next we're going to dive into the most compelling piece of evidence in this case, the DNA.
Oh, okay.
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay. Let's unravel this DNA mystery and see where it leads us.
Absolutely. So we have all these theories and suspicions, right? This big mystery surrounding this case. But then in 2003, there's a big development, something that could change everything.
Okay.
Investigators were able to get a DNA profile from a mixed blood sample that they found on JonBenét's underwear.
Wow.
And this DNA, it didn't match anyone in the Ramsey family.
So it sounds like this confirms the intruder theory.
Well, not so fast. When they ran the sample through the FBI's DNA database, they got nothing, no match.
So what could explain this unidentified DNA if it wasn't from an intruder?
Well, you have to remember, the crime scene wasn't handled perfectly. There's always the possibility of contamination. Maybe the DNA belonged to someone who had been in the house before.
Okay.
A repairman, a delivery person, even the smallest trace of DNA can be picked up with today's technology.
Okay, so maybe it was just a coincidence. But then they found more male DNA.
Yes. Later testing revealed 2 more male DNA profiles. They found something called touch DNA on the sides of JonBenét's pants. The theory is that whoever pulled those pants down might have left their DNA behind.
So now we have 3 unidentified men, potentially connected to this crime scene through DNA. How do investigators even begin to make sense of this?
It's complicated, and what's even more perplexing is that the Boulder Police Department, they seemed really hesitant to shift their focus away from the Ramseys.
Oh.
It's like they were fixated on the family, almost to the exclusion of other possibilities.
Do you think that's because of how they handled the crime scene? You know, the fact that it wasn't handled perfectly?
It's possible. There have been a lot of criticisms of the Boulder Police Department over the years. There have been reports of missed opportunities, lost evidence, and this tunnel vision focus on the Ramseys.
Where does that leave us? We have 3 unidentified men.
Yeah.
Linked to the crime scene through DNA. We have a ransom note that feels like a movie script, a family under suspicion, and a police investigation that's been called into question.
It's a mess.
It really is.
But here's the thing. John Ramsey has never given up on finding his daughter's killer.
Good for him.
He believes that new DNA technology can be used to re-examine the evidence and hopefully finally identify the culprit.
Is that even possible after all this time?
DNA technology has advanced so much since 1996. We have techniques now like forensic genealogy
Oh, yeah.
that uses DNA databases to trace familial connections. They can potentially identify suspects who might not even be in traditional criminal databases.
That's amazing.
It's like something out of science fiction,
Yeah.
but it's happening in real life, and it's been used to solve a lot of cold cases.
So they could take that unidentified male DNA,
Yeah.
build a family tree, and then track down the person it belongs to.
Exactly. And that's what John Ramsey is fighting for. He wants the Boulder police to send the DNA evidence to a lab that specializes in this kind of analysis.
So what's the holdup? Why haven't they done that yet?
That's a good question. John Ramsey has said that he's really frustrated with the Boulder Police Department's lack of interest in this. Some people think that they're worried about the legal ramifications. If new evidence comes out, that reveals mistakes in their original investigation.
So they're more concerned with protecting their own reputations than with finding the truth.
That's one way to look at it.
But this isn't just about the police. This is about a father who lost his daughter, and he deserves answers. What is John Ramsey doing to keep the pressure on?
Well, he's not just sitting back and waiting for the police to act. He's become an advocate for change. He's pushing for legislation that would give families of homicide victims more power in cases where they feel law enforcement is falling short.
So he's turning his personal tragedy
Yeah,
into a fight for systemic change.
exactly.
What kind of legislation is he backing?
He's been a big supporter of the Homicide Victims Family Rights Act in Colorado.
Okay.
This act would give families the legal right to request an independent review of a case and potentially have it transferred to another agency, like the FBI, if they believe the original investigation was mishandled.
That's interesting. So it's all about giving families a stronger voice,
Hmm.
making sure that cases like JonBenét's don't fall through the cracks.
That's right. And it's not just about Colorado. He actually tried to push for a federal law that would make the murder of a child a federal offense.
Wow.
But that effort faced a lot of legal hurdles.
It sounds like he's up against a lot of resistance. Do you think these efforts will actually lead to any real change?
It's hard to say. But one thing is for sure, John Ramsey is not giving up.
He's determined to keep fighting.
Not just for his daughter, but for all families who have been denied justice.
It's really a testament to the power of a father's love.
Absolutely.
So even though he's facing an uphill battle, he's still holding on to hope.
He believes that one day, thanks to these advancements in DNA technology, the person who killed his daughter will be identified and brought to justice.
It's really inspiring to see that he hasn't given up hope.
Yeah.
Even after all these years, it's a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, the pursuit of justice should never end.
And it really underscores the importance of continued advancements in forensic science. Who knows what breakthroughs are waiting for us in the future?
Yeah, and how those breakthroughs might help us solve this case.
Yeah,
And countless others like it.
absolutely.
It's certainly a case that stays with you.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the crime itself, but also about the systems we rely on to deliver justice. And speaking of questions, I have one for you, our listeners. After hearing all this, the ransom note, the DNA, the theories, what do you think happened? What's your gut feeling about this case?
It's hard to say. There's just so much we don't know, but it definitely makes you think about how we perceive evidence, how we form our opinions about guilt and innocence.
Yeah, it's a case that really challenges you to examine your own biases.
Absolutely.
We've
yeah.
covered so much ground today. The crime scene, the theories about the Ramseys, the possibility of an intruder, the DNA evidence. And yet we're still left with more questions than answers.
That's the nature of a true mystery. Sometimes, even with all the advancements in technology, we just can't find all the pieces of the puzzle. But that doesn't mean we should stop searching.
Absolutely not. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the JonBenét Ramsey case. We hope you found it informative and maybe even a little bit unsettling.
It's definitely a case that sticks with you.
If you're interested in learning more about this case, there are tons of resources out there, books, documentaries, podcasts. You can even find online forums dedicated to this case.
Yeah, people are still actively investigating this case, trying to find new evidence, new angles.
Yeah. Search for truth never ends.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening.